Beneath every spasm and quiver of American popular music, every trend, style, genre, and moment we see every day lies a core animating soul, the entity which lends its life force to the entire body and gives every muscle its reason to move. The blues uniquely tells America's story. Born from a community with a centuries-deep history of oppression in a region which is still one of the poorest in the entire country, the experience of the blues is the most intense form of the American experience. The fundamental music theory of the blues still appears in every subsequent genre of American music, and the tough contradictions addressed by its lyrics and themes still animate American society today. No style of music speaks to the American soul quite like the blues, and no artist conveys that message quite as succinctly as Son House does on his record Father of Folk Blues. While we don't know exactly when and where the blues first appeared, we know it was developed across the American South after the Civil War. The key influence on the blues was traditional black spiritual music in America, a style which itself was influenced by Western folk music, African folk music, religious traditions from both regions, and the unique experience of enslaved people. The blues was immediately seen as a liberating force, as it was unafraid of social taboos surrounding sex, the loss of faith, and other hot-button issues of the time. It was unafraid of addressing personal issues, and it was equally unafraid of addressing the personal implications of systemic injustice. You can probably already start to see the blues' cultural impact, but the place where the blues was the most impactful was on music theory. You see, traditional Western music might use the major scale, or the minor scale, but the blues had its own entire scale, the blues scale, which specifically included a note which was not included in the Western major or minor scales, a note which was called the blue note and would become very important to constructing melodies in the blues, in rock and roll, and especially jazz. You can already see where the blues was massively influential on American melodies, but it was even more influential on American harmonies. The main harmonic pattern of the blues is called the 12-bar blues, and once you hear it once, you will hear it all over the place in American music. From here, you can probably already connect the dots into where the blues influenced jazz and R&B, and from jazz and R&B, you get rock and hip-hop, electronic music, dance music, pop music, and everything else to come. Now, why does Son House's story specifically play so well into the history of the blues? So Son House started his career as a pastor, but later left the church to pursue a career as a blues musician. Now, making this switch wasn't just a simple career move. Reading sources from the time reveals that there was a core tension between the church and the blues. And yes, there were plenty of dual carders. It was definitely possible to go to the blues bar or the juke joint on Saturday night and go to church on Sunday morning. But for higher-ups in both of these scenes, the crossover was minimal, and that division was considered pretty vast. The blues was just generally more comfortable with the body. It was more likely to embrace vice as a natural part of life, and to see life as something to be enjoyed rather than something to direct us to a spiritual future. Son House's lyrics are entirely unafraid to talk about this divide, and they draw quite a wide distinction between the church and the blues. And it's not that Son House thinks that the blues is better than the church. In fact, he longs for a spirituality that could include him, but he's been left jaded by his experience as a pastor and is fundamentally untrusting of sources of spiritual authority. He also feels left behind by his tendency to indulge in vice. Son House is also a particularly strong ambassador for the blues because he uses its most influential style, the Delta blues. His bent guitar strings can be seen in all sorts of later music, especially heavier styles of classic rock. And his evocative, yet almost spoken vocals seem like something that we could replicate, but they still ooze the emotion of the speaker. Now, the blues succeeded for a variety of reasons. It's community-oriented, it's catchy, it's repeatable, but most importantly, the emotions are what made the genre stick. Like the emotions we see here, House takes his self-exile from the church extremely seriously. He longs to believe, but he just can't after being jaded by what he knows about the inside of the structure of the church. The production environment plays extremely well into this. It sounds like House is playing into an endless void. And this musical tendency towards repetition gives the entire message a feeling of finality and stagnation. This desperation picks up an even greater air of tragedy when we realize realized that this was recorded towards the end of Son House's life. The weakness of age combined with the desperation of his voice makes everything on this record extremely emotionally potent. Son House's experience of his church really maps well onto the American experience of being American. We're born into this society that gives us a very strict definition of the good guy, of the progression of history, of a place that we're all moving towards a point of better freedom. But we have these experiences throughout our lives that just pile up our doubt about this progression and about this entire system. This disillusionment is especially true in marginalized people, of which rural people, working people, and people of color all heavily overlap in the Mississippi Delta region, which inspired this music. And Son House deals with his contradiction, and we deal with our contradictions in the way that people in this country always have, by making art. Everything about the father of folk blues instantly makes apparent why this movement had such a lasting impact on American culture. The chord progression comes up everywhere. We see the beginnings of sing-along choruses. The guitar style comes up in roots music to this day. But most importantly, that fundamental striving for meaning stuck in the whirlpool between two great cultural forces in America, that's something we can all relate to. And that extends beyond the American to the universal human condition. The dissolution of institutions and the resulting nihilism is something that affects everyone. That dreaded feeling of nihilism, of pointlessness that comes on after being cast out into the desert is something everyone is susceptible to feeling. In desperation, we search for answers. We search for a way to be let back into something that gives us meaning. But our answer was right there in the way that we asked the question, at least in the case of Son House. It's the music. The art we create in addressing this condition is the beginning of creating a culture that can include everyone.